Today is election day here in Canada. At the time of this recording, it is April 28th. We're not going to get into that, though. We're just going to talk about the Toronto real estate market. And on this special day, I have an uber special guest that is super famous, not only in the real estate industry amongst consumers and real estate agents, but among Torontonians everywhere, because everybody's been watching a Raptors game and seeing that great, iconic Sam McDadi logo there on the court. Sam, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I want to jump right into your backstory. Like, you've built obviously one of the most recognizable, successful real estate brands in Canada, probably honestly in the world. Take us back to the beginning. What first drew you into real estate, and did you ever imagine that your business would grow into what it is right now?
You know, initially in my younger years, I developed a love and passion for the game of tennis, and I was able to get a tennis scholarship down south. So I spent about 4.5 years near New Orleans, and then continued my education, did an MBA, and I worked in the corporate sector for a couple of years, came back, and I thought that's where I should be after getting an MBA, but I was really unhappy. I just get the Sunday night blues. I thought, I don't want to do this for 40 years. I need to find something I'm passionate about. You know, I got into real estate as a low cost entry. I thought I liked houses and peoples. The journey was tough. The first few years, it was really easy to give up. I didn't have contacts. I didn't really have any money. I was just grinding, and it was just tough to find my way. But I thought, but I really love what I'm doing. Hopefully I can make an income at this, living at this. And, you know, and this is where I want to be. I just need to find a way to make an income. So at some point, I turned the corner. I emulated some people who are really successful. I became a buyer agent. Ironically, now we love listings, but back then I was kind of doing more buyers than listings. And you know, things started turning, and eventually we had some success, and I started building the team out. And back then there wasn't really models. There wasn't, you know, Keller Williams had great, now they have great, you know, team models so they can tell you how to build it, what percentages, all of the above. For us, it was trial and error to figure out what we wanted to do. But I was really committed to the business. I knew I wanted this forever. And so every dollar I was making, I was reinvesting back in our business. And eventually, and we'll talk with this as well, you know, branding was an important piece for us as well to really separate ourselves from the pack.
You mentioned a couple of things there that I want to dig into. You spoke about a turning point. What was that turning point? What did that look like?
I remember one day I did 2 deals. And I was super excited, and and you shouldn't really do this, but I had some debts and credit card debts, and I was counting how much I was making so I could pay some of this stuff off, and both of them fell apart. And so neither went through. Basically, you know, and it was kind of my fault. Yeah, I gave it to our mortgage broker, and he said, listen, you know, that person unfortunately went bankrupt a month ago. They're not in a position to buy. I should have asked those qualifying questions. And number two, one of my mom's dear friends who just passed away a few weeks ago, we showed her 100 houses, and she decided she didn't want to make that move, right? So it was really difficult, but I said, you know what? I still believe this is where I want to be. And I can either use this time as to say, hey, I'm gonna get out of this business, it's too difficult, or I'm gonna dig deep, and I still believe I can make this work. And so that moment was a real turning point, because so many people would have given up and maybe not seen light at the end of the tunnel in the successes we've had in the years subsequent. But I was really committed to saying, no, I'm not giving up. This is still where I want to be.
Do you find that experience has made it easier for you in times of hardship and adversity to continue on?
Absolutely. And even my training when I was on a tennis scholarship, and when I did my master's, I was working 20 years as a graduate coordinator. So I'd learned how to compete and thrive under pressure. So yeah, I mean, the problem is the last decade or so, most realtors have seen just good days. So, you know, they haven't seen adversity, and they don't know what to do in a market like today where things have shifted. And for us, we just know, hey, we just have to readjust and recalibrate and find different ways to create business opportunities and not succumb to the pressure.
And how, on a day-to-day basis, I suppose, for most realtors, how much do you anticipate the adversity in terms of taking that next step? How much do you anticipate that it's an execution gap versus a knowledge gap?
I think it's both. I believe that a lot of realtors were, if you use the word loosely, order takers, and business was coming pretty easily. They didn't have to, you know, hone in the craft. And I think there's so many different layers to the business, and being at this 35 plus years, you know, we've had to adapt to all sorts of market conditions, rates when they're double digits. And, you know, when the non-resident ban came in, and, you know, there's talks of the Great Depression, 08, 09. So you always have to readjust. And it's also an opportunity for us, even in my business practice, to look at when things are a little bit softer. You know, when the 21, when the market for everybody was lights out after we got, you know, over that initial hump of COVID, the market was just like booming, right? And when revenue is really high, you sometimes have a tendency to not focus too much on expenses. Last year, when revenue is lower, you're really looking at all your line items, and it's crazy what you unravel too. I know, but I think the mental fortitude and resilience is an important factor during difficult times.
So, do you think that agents are struggling with a knowledge gap as well as an execution gap, or do you think it's mostly that mental fortitude?
Well, I think it's also a knowledge gap for sure, because I don't think many realtors don't know how to pivot in a difficult market and deal with the clients in the correct fashion as well.
You also mentioned that you wanted to emulate the successful people, and that sort of helped you get over that hurdle. What were those emulations? What were you doing?
So one of my key mentors back in the day was a girl named Kim Egerton, and I had a lot of respect for her because she was a buyer agent. That's where I think I fell into that place as well. And she was doing 100, 120 deals on her own per annum, without any help, and she was just grinding. So it taught me, hey, listen, buyers are great because, and especially in this market, buyers are wonderful too, because you're not having to compete with 5 or 10 different offers, and you can have a clear path to success. And if you counsel your buyers properly, tell them this is the best time to buy. When there's adversity in the marketplace, you can carve a good deal, right? So she was a great, role model for me. And then I looked from afar of people like Craig Proctor, who was, really building a great business out in the Pickering Ajax area. And he was one of the first few to pioneer teams. And so he was somebody I looked up to in terms of the team concept and what he did and how he grew his business. So, and to me, a lot of times realtors back then weren't as forthcoming in sharing the information. And so for me, if somebody asks me questions, I'm all in to give them all the advice, because A, I know it's not easy to get to the top, and B, if they can be at the top, there's room for lots at the top. So we're always happy to share information as well.
So you like Craig Proctor's a name that comes up a lot, both in the real estate space and in the real estate coaching space. And obviously I service a lot of agents, so he's someone that I follow and admire greatly as well. Were you sort of watching him from afar as he sort of developed his team and kind of emulating that, making sure you're not making those same mistakes? Like how much of it was trial and error and how much of it was like following his lead?
Yeah, I mean, I watched him from afar. It was more trial and error for us because I didn't know the splits, really any of the above, right? So for us, we were fumbling around a little bit, just trying to figure out what's going to make sense. And at the time I tell people, when you want to grow a team, grow it out of necessity. Don't just do it because it's in vogue and you think it's the right thing to do. Because if you're not equipped to take a team to the next level, either be training, leads, and all the above, you won't have a successful, sustainable team concept. So for us, it grew out of necessity when we felt that, hey, I just couldn't do it on my own anymore. And if I want to provide the same level of service, I had to have different people come in. And I was a little bit slow to add admin, and I think that's one of my bigger regrets, that I should have added admin earlier in the game. But initially, when I added realtors, one was one of my childhood friends who was doing his PhD, and he wasn't having success in the job world. So we got him to get his license. So my lawyer left his practice to become a realtor, and my banker left her practice. So we formed this group. Like I said, it was trial and error. And I thought first it'd be the four of us kind of equal, but it became apparent I was probably more of the workhorse, and I was going to probably lead, right? So, and that's kind of how it evolved. The other part was with the admin. I think it's so important to get a good key admin person. And I always tell people to say, listen, figure out your hourly value. If it's 100, 200, 500, 5,000 an hour. And if that job that you're doing is less than that, don't do it. Delegate it, right? Because you only have so many hours in a day. And even if you're not working, you want to free yourself up to do things you enjoy doing. Because one of the things we're really most proud about is we stayed kind of fresh in the game, even though it's 35 years later. I still love it. I'm still passionate about it. We didn't burn out, which a lot of times you will see that. And I think that's really important because you want to have longevity in this business as well.
You said something that is actually part of the Keller Williams organizational model. When it comes to building a team, really the first line of defense or the first hire should be an admin, because you want to build up that wall of value. There's a lot of resistance that I get whenever I'm coaching agents on this that are looking to expand. I mean, there's a couple of things in there that I do want to dig into, but specifically looking at the admin first. From your experience, why was that something that when you say you look back at it and you regret you should have done that first, why was that your experience?
Because I was doing everything. And so I was qualifying people, GDS, TDS, I was doing the ad writing. So there wasn't anything I wasn't touching. It was like, became pretty evident that I was going to burn out, right? I just, I was staying up till 2 a.m, getting up at 7 or 8 because I was a perfectionist. And some of those tasks, and I think for me, it's sometimes difficult. It was difficult for me and maybe others as well to let go. But when you have the right people in place, it's like, so for it took me years to be able to finally let go a bit of that piece of business that really I should have no right holding on to anyway, to now where I have 4 or 5 personal administrators, and I'm so free that it allows me to enjoy my life and do what I should be doing, which is to be in front of people, be it, buyers or sellers, more sellers. I mean, with buyers, a lot of times our team members will help in that initiative till a buyer is closer to the finish line. Then I'll show a second time and negotiate the offer. I think if you realize your value, then you shouldn't do things that aren't worth that, because otherwise you are going to burn out. And that's historically what happens to a lot of good realtors.
The situation that I find for myself is I've got an agent in front of me, let's say, who's doing about 10 transactions a year, maybe 15 transactions, and they're starting to get, I don't want to say overwhelmed, because I don't know if an agent should be overwhelmed per se at 15 transactions, but if they're, let's say, really pushing hard on prospecting and they want to hire an admin theoretically and they understand their worth and they reverse engineer, I wouldn't be working for $20 an hour, therefore I should be paying somebody, fine. But then they look at the prospect of hiring somebody for $75,000 a year that's legit, and that scares them because they have to come up with $75,000 a year plus extra in order for it to be a worthwhile investment. Let's say if you're having that conversation with an agent like I just described, what would you say to them?
Well, I think that's a valid point, right? Because sometimes you're nervous. Can you make sure you can afford to keep them, and it's not going to impact your cash flow? But sometimes what might make sense, let's say even within our team, I'll always share the same thoughts that, listen, I think you should have admin to help you out. That's going to free you up. And if they don't want to do it singularly, I'll just say, why don't you guys group 2 or 3 people and get admin that's going to help 3 of you, right? So that way you just cost share. So I think if they aren't really comfortable yet with their income to say, I'm going to spend 75,000 or whatever that number looks like, then I think if you divide it by 2 or 3, then 25 or 37.5 is a whole lot more palatable for an agent to say, yeah, that can make sense for me, right? So I do think at some point when you grow your business, you should have your own and you have that level of success. But if it's just maybe baby steps, I think that's fine as well.
And you mentioned earlier that these things sort of happen at a point of necessity. And like, obviously necessity is the mother of all inventions. And any time I've, let's say, tried to create a product or a company because I wanted to create something, it's always been like I'm fighting an uphill battle all the time. But anytime I've done something that just made sense given the situation, it was like smooth sailing downhill. It was much, much easier. And I think it's kind of the same over here.
Yeah, listen, the way I look at it sometimes is, okay, if I'm too busy doing my day in, day out, and I don't have the right support, administrative help, then one missed opportunity of, a $2 million property is $50,000 in remuneration. That covers, line share of one person, right? So to me, if you want to think big, which I think is really important, if you want to succeed, I'm not saying your first week or two out of the gate. So, but if you're in the business 6 months, a year, as you start building a book of business, and you're serious about this business, that's when I think you should add those layers. That's going to give you longevity and the ability to leverage and have success doing so.
Let's look at leading the agents on the team, right? So leading a team during a boom is one thing. It's very easy to motivate people when everyone's making money and times are great. But at the down market, that's where real leadership is necessary. How have you been able to support your agents through this tougher market?
I think it's multi-pronged. Number one is we're there for them, any dialogue that needs to ensue, because it has been more challenging for some of the agents who have only seen good days, right? So I think a lot of it is one-on-one meetings, it's group meetings, it's making sure we provide as much lead generation opportunities as possible. It's coaching them through difficult clients and difficult times. So I think it's all of the above, but it's not easy because, when people aren't making the income they'd like to or they're used to, then, you have to be able to help them through that process. And no, it's a blip in the market and eventually things will resume, but they have to have longevity and also talk about finances as well. So making sure that they're, smart with their funding. They're not, they save. And that's why when you have a good days, you got to save for a rainy day, because people probably wouldn't have projected this was going to come out. And we've had this year and a half difficult period where, it was initially governed by or dictated by higher rates, where there was such a rate increase that it took people offside. And then of course, this year it looked like it was going to be, a better year. And then the tariff discussion kind of scared a lot of people. And so when you have uncertainty, there's paralysis. And so, you've got to navigate through all that. But I think the coaching element as well, and just making sure that they're reaching out to all their clients, they're talking to their buyers, they're telling them this is a good time to buy versus letting them sit on the sidelines. So it's all of the above.
And have you had to change or adapt any of your team strategies, like be it prospecting or marketing, client conversations? Have you helped them adapt, or have you, I guess, requested or necessitated that they change or adapt any of these strategies?
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely we'll talk with the seller side. I think that what's really important today is the communication piece, right? Because if properties aren't getting as many showings, or they're not getting the offers or the activity or traction, then I think if you're dialoguing on a weekly basis with the clients and kind of being proactive, that's critical. If you're leaving your clients, untouched for 2 months, then that's a problem, because now they don't think you're not on top. Really important. And with buyers, like I was alluding to earlier, I think it's really important with buyers today that, they should be aware this is a great time to enter the market. I mean, there's probably one of those periods where you can carve a really good deal. And a lot of buyers are almost fearful. They don't want to enter the market when it is kind of the best times, like the stock market. The market's low. You don't want to buy when it's high. Let's get in there, right? And I think buyers say can capitalize on some great opportunities. So I think that coaching piece and making sure, it's reinforced with all our team members is really vital as well.
How do you, because it's an emotional question, right? Like recognize that the shift provides a gift as well, right? There's opportunity and a challenge. Because it's an emotional question, is it about getting all of your team members to recognize the opportunity? Is that about sort of those one-on-one conversations? Is that more of a cultural dynamic? How do you help them see those opportunities?
I think it's both. I mean, we have our weekly meetings every Wednesday, and we talk about the market activities and trends for that week, what we can recommend in terms of how to navigate, and then it's also sometimes one-on-one. So it's a bit of both. Some agents are self-starters; they do well regardless of any market conditions, and others, we probably have to hold their hand a little bit more and give them some counsel and comfort, and just make sure that they know they're on the right path, and that's important as well too. So you have to understand each person's personality as well too.
Let's shift it a little bit. Let's go on one question about the election. I'm not going to ask you who you're voting for or anything like that, but let's pretend if you were advising the next government, whomsoever it may be, what's the one thing that you would like to see them prioritize in order to strengthen the real estate market in Canada and in Ontario over the next few years?
Well, I think there's a few points. Number one, and I've had talks with the leaders of the parties, and one of the things I think is important is that affordability has become an issue now, and qualifying is difficult. The stress test made sense when rates were sub 2%, so that you kind of build a buffer when you had to renew down the road, that you had a plus 2%. Built into the equation. But now, if you're paying 4.5, and you've got to qualify in 6.5, it's difficult, right? So I'd like to see them remove the stress test, number one. I also think it wasn't probably prudent to have a ban on non-residents buying real estate. I think they bring money into the economy, into the country. So I think they've got another year and a half on that before hopefully that gets removed permanently, because I think when you've let the wrong people into the country, people who basically are taken versus putting back into the economy, that's a mistake. To me, and let the free market run on its own. Sometimes government intervention is unnatural, right? So when you come in and you raise rates too quickly, too fast, too hard, you cause a big, panic attack in the market. And I would say same thing happened in 17 when they brought out the non-resident tax. I think that was very, very bad timing. It was April, and that was the height of the spring market. People were buying, think the market was red hot. All of a sudden, your tap got turned off. Now, if you're caught in the cycle where you just bought a house, really confident you can sell your house for big dollars, and all of a sudden that narrative changed, it put people in a very difficult position. So I think, the invisible hand, let the free market run on its own without too much natural intervention. But I think stress test and removal of the non-residence ban would be important for me to see moving forward and keeping our market fluid.
So let's fast forward 1 year from today. Based on your conversations with both political leaders, do you anticipate that the Toronto home prices will be higher, lower, or about the same?
I believe our GTA market is always going to be vibrant. We're going through a difficult patch, which is going to be short term, but we're the economic hub of Canada. So I think we'll probably be seeing our, after the adjustment and all the noise with the tariffs, hopefully that dissipates. But, we'll probably see inflationary 3 to 5% growth increase. I think that's not unreasonable. I know some of the government position, some of the leaders believe that the prices should drop. I'm not a believer of that. I think the prices are where they are. You can't compare our prices to Buffalo. I mean, it's just totally different. So if you want to say on the other side of the border, they're, a fraction of the price, yeah, but it's a fraction of the economy, right? So I think trying to leverage and put the prices down is a mistake, because too many people will get hit hard. But I think you don't want the prices doubling in the next couple of years as well. But inflationary 3 to 5 to 7% annual increases are reasonable, and I think that's what people should expect. And I think if the government tries too hard to push the prices down, that's not the right strategy as well.
Right. So I guess your solution would be sort of step back, stop imposing, and let the free market sort of self-correct.
So it's to its natural level, correct?
Right. I got you. That sounds like a pretty sensible position to hold. If you had to bet on one area in the GTA for the best growth over the next 5 years, because we have these cities like Mississauga, for example, if you go back 15 years or whatever it is, looks way different than it does now. So what's the next city that will have the best growth over the next 5 years in the GTA?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm a Mississauga guy. I reside in Mississauga, and a lot of our business is West End, although we've got 7 offices throughout the GTA. That's a great question. I mean, I know initially when the prices really went up exponentially here in the GTA. That outskirts were doing really well. Hamilton took off, which was crazy because for the longest time it was flatlined, and then even Niagara and all those regions were doing really well. But that's kind of retreated a little bit because now prices have come off in the city, and maybe the commute isn't worthwhile. I wish I could tell you here's where I think the next big move is, but I think you've got to look at markets where they're undervalued today and the prices are lower, underperforming, and I think you'll see some growth opportunities. And it's probably even the KW Kitchener-Waterloo at one point was undervalued, and that really moved up a lot. So I think the outskirts have started performing well. And the question is, where's the next big thing? And I can't answer with certainty.
So before we kind of close out, I just want to get into you and your business for a moment. Obviously, with every level of real estate business growth comes its own unique set of challenges. For you and your business, where you're at, because you're pretty much unprecedented, uncharted territory, barring a few top producers. What's one thing that you'd like to dive into for yourself from a professional development perspective that would help further your career, that would have the biggest impact for you?
Yeah, for me, it's been interesting because the journey's been a lot of fun, and there's, some areas we've realized recognize we can improve upon. And so one of the areas that I think was really important for me was that, I'm really sales and marketing. That's my forte. But we've built a pretty big business with a lot of great people within the organization. I probably wasn't as hands-on. So I brought my brother on, who was previously VP of operations with Tennis Canada. And so the operational component now is really being well managed because we're looking at all, we're meeting with the staging team weekly, like my brother is, as well as the photography team, the marketing team, the moving team. So, and I think that's really important because, this is for us like a family, and we want everybody to feel like it's a second family. And sometimes my life gets busy and I'm not touching everybody as much as I should be. And I think that layer now has been, and it also helps us identify, like even with budgets and things like that, I mentioned there's some, really eye-opening, things we noted that we really should have been caught, and that's kind of on us. But I think when you grow the business to a certain level, having the right operational supporting cast is great. And I think for us right now, as the market is transitioning, is, how do we make sure our team members all succeed in an adverse market? And that's one of the big goals for us as well today. And that's, do we need different coaching methods as well, in addition to mine, to have different eyes with the team? And I think that's things we're looking at as well. Integrating the new AI. AI is obviously going to be a very important element for us. So we're really understanding that, trying to understand that piece as best we can. I'm not an expert. That's why we need experts to really help the team. And we're starting AI training to, not only just your chat GPT, but other ways we can really explode that. We met with a graphic artist today who's lobbying for a job with us, and he said, yeah, my job's almost redundant now. Before I give people, here's 10 different opportunities to pick, branding designs. Now you just AI, I want 10 branding designs, and boom, you get it, and you get 100 and 1,000 in a matter of seconds. So my job's obsolete. So, the world is changing. We have to adapt and adjust with that as well.
How do you anticipate the role and responsibilities of a real estate agent will change with this insurgence of AI?
Initially when web took over 25 years ago and became, of the mindset that, our jobs will become redundant. But so I think, we're no longer the gatekeepers of information. I think AI will change our business, but it will never remove the requirement for a real estate agent, right? Our role might shift because things are changing so quickly, but the human interaction, the comforting with the client, the helping with the financing and all of it, that's always going to be there. But our role has certainly changed the last 3 decades a lot. It will continue to do so, but I think you have to be cutting edge and be on top of all the different changes so that you're relevant. And I think the key piece is relevance, because if you're not relevant, you'll become extinct. And one of the things like I said, we were always most proud about is that, we look back 30 years ago when those guys like Proctor and all these other, who were like top of the craft, and, got to that place. And we've stayed there for a couple of decades, like being number one in the GTA for 15 years or so. To us, that's a testament to just having a great group, a great supporting cast, but also staying fresh, which is why we talked about having good admin support and all above, and keeping an eye on all the changes in the marketplace that are taking place and being ahead of that. And that's why you need a team to be able to kind of really navigate and give you that insight as well.
The agents that I'm speaking with specifically for this podcast are agents that are in, let's say, about 6 transactions, let's say 4 to 6 transactions, looking to get to 10, 15 plus. And a lot of the time, what comes next, obviously, is building a team like we spoke about. If there was one word of advice, one piece of advice that you could give to an agent that's found their own solo success and is based on necessity needing to grow out into a team, what would you tell that agent?
Well, listen, I think if you're doing 4 to 6, that's great, but you want to get to at least 20 to 30, at least 2 or 3 a month. I think that's what your goal should be as a single practitioner. And the question is, are you ready to pay the price for success, right? Because 4 to 6 is a nice starting point. I mean, for me, I was doing 150 deals on my own as a buyer agent. So I was doing 3, 4 a week, right? So, but I was burning the midnight oil. I had a goal. I mean, my dad had a successful business who lost everything. So my goal is to work really hard to get them a house. And I did before he passed away, which was really important. So you need, what's your why? Why are you doing this, right? So, but I think look around successful people, ask good questions. I spoke yesterday at a group it was a luxury panel, real estate. And I tell agents who come up to me, here's my number, call me if you have any questions. I'll help you build your business if I can. And so I think ask good questions for really good agents. I think that's really important, but know your worth. Like 4 to 6 is a great starting point. You got to get to 20 or 30 for sure. And then start thinking about adding pieces like admin and then keep growing the business. Rome wasn't built in a day, but if you really have a passion for this business, you build it with honesty and integrity, 3 to 5 years, you'll look back and say, I can't believe where my business is. And like you asked me today, did I think my business would be where, in 21, we did 1.4 billion in sales and helped 1,400 families? I didn't see that on the radar. I just knew I was having fun and I could take this to a good place. And then when we had success, that becomes contagious.
Thank you so much, Sam, for coming on the show. Really appreciate all your time and insights. Guys, if you're looking to grow your real estate business, reach out to Sam. Have a conversation with him. If you're looking to buy a home, reach out to Sam and his team. He is absolutely the best in the biz for a reason. So like I said, thank you so much, Sam, for giving us your time.